Jason, a 14-year-old homeless boy, sat on a cold sidewalk, his stomach aching with hunger. He clutched a crumpled piece of paper, his last hope resting on a few shaky words he had written. "Dear Mr. Trump, I need $10 for food. I don't expect you to care, but I had to try." He had no idea if the letter would ever reach him, but he had nothing to lose. Gathering his courage, he walked up to Trump Tower and hesitated at the entrance. A security guard frowned. "You can't just walk in here." Jason held up the letter. "Please, can you just give this to him?" The guard sighed, took the letter, and disappeared inside. Jason didn't expect anything to happen, but fate had other plans. Hours later, in his New York office, Donald Trump skimmed through a stack of letters. His assistant glanced at Jason's note and scoffed. "Just another kid begging for money." Trump paused. $10? He tapped the paper, intrigued. "Find out who he is." His assistant frowned. "Sir, he's just a homeless." "Nobody is just anything," Trump interrupted. "Get me details." By morning, his team had tracked Jason down. He moved between shelters, had no parents, no phone, just a kid struggling to survive. Trump leaned back in his chair. "Bring him to me." Jason had never been in a limo before. He sat stiffly as the driver took him to a place he never thought he'd see, the inside of Trump Tower. When he was led into Trump's office, his heart pounded. The man himself sat across from him, studying him closely. "You asked for $10, Trump said. Jason nodded, suddenly nervous. "For food?" Trump smirked. "Do you really think $10 will change your life?" Jason hesitated. "No." "Good." Trump leaned forward. "I have a better offer." Jason's fingers tightened around the chair. "What kind of offer?" "A job." Jason blinked. "But I'm just a kid." Trump shrugged. "So? You need money, right? Then earn it." Jason was speechless. No one had ever given him a real chance before. He thought about all the times people had ignored him on the street. Was this real? Trump's assistant handed him an address. "Be there tomorrow morning. No excuses." Jason stared at the paper. This was more than he had asked for, more than he had ever hoped for the first time in a long time. He had a chance. "Should I continue?" "Let me know." The next morning, Jason stood outside a towering building. The address Trump's assistant had given him. His borrowed clothes felt too big, his shoes worn out, but he refused to turn back. He stepped inside, greeted by a receptionist who barely glanced at him. "You're the new intern?" she scoffed. Jason swallowed his nerves. "Yes." The first few days were tough. He ran errands, sorted files, and fetched coffee. Nothing glamorous. But he never complained. He showed up early, stayed late, and did every task with determination. One afternoon, he overheard a heated discussion in a conference room. A group of executives argued over a struggling project. Jason, unnoticed, listened carefully until he spotted something, a mistake, a big one. His heart pounded. Should he speak up? He wasn't supposed to be here. He was just a kid. But then he remembered Trump's words. "Earn it." Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Excuse me, I think there's an error in your calculations." Silence. A senior executive frowned. "Who let the intern in?" Before Jason could answer, a familiar voice cut in. "I did." Donald Trump had entered the room. The air shifted. "Well," Trump looked at Jason. "Explain." Jason's hands trembled as he pointed to the figures. "This projection is off. The numbers don't match the data from last quarter." The room fell silent. Then one of the analysts rechecked the numbers. "He's right," the analyst admitted, stunned. Trump smirked. "Then fix it." He turned to Jason. "Get this kid a real desk." Jason's breath caught. He had just proven himself. He wasn't just a homeless kid anymore. He belonged here. As weeks passed, Jason worked harder than ever. He studied, asked questions, and absorbed everything like a sponge. He still lived in a shelter, but now he had hope. One evening, Trump called him to his office. "You're doing well," Trump said. "But tell me, what do you really want?" Jason hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. "I want a life," he finally said. "A real one." Trump nodded. "Then stop waiting for one to be given to you. Build it." Those words stuck with Jason. Months later, he was no longer an intern. He had earned a permanent position. He moved into a small apartment, no longer sleeping on the streets. His past felt like a distant memory. But then, a familiar face appeared. A boy from the streets, Nate, one of Jason's old friends. "I need money," Nate said. "Just $50. Jason knew that feeling. Desperation, hunger. But he also knew handouts weren't the answer. "Come work with me," Jason offered. "I can get you a job." Nate scoffed. "I don't want a job. I just need cash." Jason sighed. He had a choice. Give Nate money or give him an opportunity. He chose the latter. Nate walked away angry, but Jason stood firm. Trump had given him a chance, not a handout. And now, Jason understood why. A sudden financial crisis shook the company. Layoffs loomed. Fear gripped Jason. Was he about to lose everything again? One evening, Trump called him. "Are you worried?" Jason hesitated. "Yes." Trump chuckled. "Then work harder. The ones who survive storms are the ones who refuse to drown." Jason took those words to heart. He worked relentlessly, proving his value. When the layoffs came, he was one of the few who stayed. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was rising. One day, Trump invited him to a private dinner. When Jason arrived, he was surprised to see Ivanka Trump there. "My father speaks highly of you," Ivanka said. Jason blinked. "He does?" Ivanka leaned forward. "We're launching a foundation to help homeless kids find jobs. Would you help us?" Jason's heart pounded. This was his chance. To give back, to help kids like him. Tears welled in his eyes. "Yes." Years passed. Jason's journey had come full circle. At a grand event, he stood beside Trump as he received an award for his work with the foundation. Trump smirked. "Not bad for a kid who just wanted $10. Jason laughed. "That wasn't what I really needed." Trump nodded. Number U needed belief. As applause filled the room, Jason scanned the crowd. Faces of people he had helped. Lives he had changed. He had gone from homeless to hopeful, from desperate to determined. And all because he had dared to ask. As Jason stood on stage, the applause ringing in his ears, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. He was no longer the lost, hungry boy who had asked for $10 on a cold street corner. He was a young man with a purpose, a life that had been rebuilt from nothing. But his journey wasn't over. It was just another chapter in a book that was still being written. After the event, as the crowd began to thin, Jason found himself walking towards the back of the room, his thoughts consumed by what was next. He'd been given a platform, and now he wanted to use it to help even more people. As he made his way to a quieter corner, Ivanka Trump caught up with him. "You did great tonight," she said, her voice warm but filled with purpose. "But I think you know this is only the beginning, right?" Jason nodded, his eyes focused on the floor for a moment. "It feels unreal sometimes, like I'm still waiting for someone to tell me it's all a dream." Ivanka smiled, understanding the depth of his words. "I get that. But this is real, Jason, and we're not stopping here. The foundation is just the start. We've got plans. Big plans." Jason's heart raced at the thought. "What kind of plans?" "We're creating a network of job programs, housing initiatives, mentorships. Everything a kid like you would need to build a future," she explained. "We want to turn this into a movement, something that can help kids all over the country." Jason's mind raced with possibilities. He could be part of something much bigger than he ever imagined. He wasn't just helping himself now. He had the power to help thousands of others who were still stuck in the same position he had been in. It was overwhelming, but it also felt like the most meaningful thing he could ever do. "What do you need from me?" Jason asked, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We need you to be the face of it," Ivanka said. "You've lived the story. You know the struggle better than anyone, and you have the strength to inspire others." Jason was silent for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in. He had gone from being a kid, asking for help, to a man who could now offer it. He'd been given the tools to change his life, and now it was time to help others do the same. "I'm in," Jason said with conviction. "I'll do whatever it takes." Ivanka smiled, proud of him. "I knew you would." As the years passed, Jason worked tirelessly with the foundation. He traveled across the country, speaking at schools, shelters, and community centers. His story became a beacon of hope for so many, and slowly but surely, he helped build a network of support for homeless youth, providing them with the opportunities he had once dreamed of. But as Jason's career and influence grew, he never forgot where he came from. Every day, he kept his promise to himself, to give back, to lift others up, and to always be the voice for the voiceless. One day, Jason stood in front of a crowd of young people in a community center, his heart swelling with pride as he looked out at the faces before him. He saw the same uncertainty he had once felt, but he also saw something else: hope. He stepped up to the microphone, the room falling silent in anticipation. "Listen," Jason began, his voice clear and full of emotion. "I was once where you are. I know what it's like to feel lost, to feel like there's no way out. But I'm here to tell you this: it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is where you're willing to go. And I'm here to help you get there." The crowd erupted into applause, and Jason smiled, feeling the weight of his words sink in. This was his purpose. This was why he had come so far. And as he left the stage, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Ivanka. "I'm proud of you, Jason. You've done more than we ever dreamed." Jason smiled to himself, knowing that with every person he helped, every life he changed, he was fulfilling the promise he had made years ago when he first asked for $10. It wasn't just about the money. It was about believing in himself and showing the world that anything was possible if you were willing to fight for it. His journey, though long, was far from over, and he was ready for whatever came next. But as he stood there, in front of so many young faces, Jason couldn't help but wonder, what if I had never asked for that $10? What if I had given up when no one believed in me? The truth was, his story wasn't just his own. It was the story of every person who had ever felt like giving up, every child who had been told they weren't enough. He looked out at the crowd, his voice trembling with emotion as he asked, "How many of you feel like you're not enough, like the world has forgotten you?" A sea of hands shot up, and Jason's heart broke for each one of them. "I was once where you are," he continued. "And if I can get here, so can you. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your dreams aren't worth chasing. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning." As the applause rang out, Jason knew that the real work was just starting. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them, all of us, rising together. And it starts with believing in the impossible.